everyone. So about after 60 hours of playing and jamming through it, I finally beat Assassin's Creed Valhalla. You can check out my full playthrough of the game on YouTube. I'll link a video or the playlist to it at the end of this video. But yeah, after much thought, I finally have my thoughts all based around what I'm going to score this game, the things I liked about it, things I didn't like. So without further ado, this is my review for Assassin's Creed Valhalla. So again, Valhalla is another entry in the Assassin's Creed series, and this follows in the footsteps of Origins and Odyssey in terms of making Assassin's Creed a fully open world RPG experience and like a true RPG. They definitely do have a lot more elements in terms of its customization, its skill tree, a whole bunch of things that truly make this a full-fledged RPG. And this is set during the Viking reigns of England, mainly after the death of the Viking king of Norway, Ragnar Lothbrok. You play as a character named Ivar, who experienced a lot of trauma around losing his family when he was really young. He gets adopted by another clan's king after the death of his parents, and he's been basically raised and almost treated as like the right hands to the future rival Sigurd, who is now who's basically, they treat each other as brothers. And them and a bunch of other Vikings decide that their place isn't in Norway anymore. They don't feel like they can forge their own destiny and their own freedoms anymore, so they decide to head to England and basically create new land for their people and shape their own legacy where they would not be able to in Norway. So they shape their destiny through basically raiding a bunch of monasteries and, like I said, just creating a brand new, more prosperous land for their people, gaining influence on the politics of the four kingdoms of England that you basically try and take over. And all of this is basically connected to the gods in Ragnarok. So Igor has a connection to Odin, there's Sigurd who has a connection to Tyr, and then I won't go too much into who all the other characters are, but you do get to visit Asgard, you do get to even go to a few of the other realms, mainly through like drug trips or visions that Ivar has with the seer of their village. But the main bulk of the gameplay and the main bulk of the assassin story takes place in the four kingdoms and just trying to influence the politics and establishing kings that are going to create basically peaceful relationships between all classes of people, whether that be Danes, Norsemen, Saxsmiths, and just the Vikings themselves. And the four kingdoms are Mercia, East Anglia, which probably has the best arc. I love the East Anglia arc, Northumbria, and Wessex. And there's a lot of detail. The landscapes are very beautiful and pretty, and they're vast, packed with a bunch of content. That's main stories, raids, treasure hunts, loot, side quests. There is definitely a lot jammed into this map, where I want to say there's even more content than there was in Odyssey. But they did downscale the map so you're not traveling as much from like your point A to point B or wherever you want to go at the time, but there is a lot more packed into this map and a lot more for you to do. But yeah, the graphics and the landscapes are stunning. Syncing up viewpoints is still remaining one of my favorite things to do in Assassin's Creed. I love climbing these huge mountains and of course big ancient structures built by the Romans when they were in England, and it just had a lot of history to it, which I really liked. Very rarely did I have texture glitches. They did pop up every now and then, mostly just when I got to England because of how much of a bigger scale it is compared to the chunk that they give you in Norway. When it comes to the graphics, really the one thing that was really buggy and just textures were bad, facial animations were really weird, were the faces of the children and some characters in the game itself, where they just weren't rendered properly and it was very buggy and nothing game breaking, but definitely laughable in terms of just how silly some of it was. With all the amazing beautiful landscapes, and when you're traveling from point A to point B and you're in raids, combats, basically whatever it is you're doing, there is an absolutely amazing soundtrack that this game packs. Assassin's Creed soundtracks have easily been some of my favorites. I do want to say that in terms of video games, I think they are highly underrated. I know everyone loves Assassin's Creed 2, but they're just consistently good, and this is another knock out of the park in terms of soundtrack. In terms of the lore of the people and just like talking about the timeline, I do think this is probably one of the most respectful and just really well researched into the lives of Norsemen in terms of their religion, their politics, their landscapes, how they envision the gods affecting their own lives and how they kind of like live through them. I thought they just did an amazing job with the history, and especially too just the history of Ragnar Lothbrok and gaining proper resources for their people, why they traveled to Europe, just because the lands were a lot more prosperous for them than they ever could in Norway, just to the passion that they had to create legacies and adventure for themselves, how that was such a big part of their identity in terms of them just wanting to travel, and even in battle wanting to go to Valhalla, wanting to go to Blaze of Glory. All the rituals that would need to be done in order for someone to go to Valhalla is very apparent. You get blood eagles, a whole bunch of things that are in this game, and I want to say they, like the show Vikings does an amazing job with showing just the lives of the Norsemen, and this game does an amazing job with that as well. Even like every single section of the map, there's new accents, new people, new customs. It's no one territory, even one village, is the exact same as the other. So it's really awesome to be able to learn all these things about the people, the culture, the times. They did an amazing job on that respect. In terms of the alternate history and the Assassin's Order, it is again pretty sidelines. I found that this whole story line has been extremely sidelined since Origins, where it's just kind of in the backgrounds, where you don't become a full-fledged assassin. You don't get to learn too much about both orders, the Assassins and the Templars. You definitely see the influence in everything, in terms of the landscape, the politics. It's just hidden in the background, and I do feel like this series has really shied away from what it was in terms of that. You don't really get this alternate history. You just see it in the landscapes. It's not really ingrained in the story. Maybe in the last, I want to say 20 minutes of the campaign, you get full-fledged Assassin's Creed lore that ties back to like even Assassin's Creed 3 and some of the older games in terms of those characters, which I thought was really, really well done, but it's mainly just mentions here and there. I haven't felt like an assassin in these games ever since the French Revolution, and it's just, I do really feel like the series has lost its way in terms of that. It's because it felt like the only thing really connecting me to the Assassins was knowing that the Order existed. They were a threat, and your hidden blade that you just wear basically as like a Baraka knife that you hit people with. It's just, I'm really missing the alternate history timeline that the old games have, and I wish they could have ingrained that a little more in the story this time around, instead of just like little, like I said, hints here and there that these organizations do exist. Part of that too just really makes me feel like these games would be better as not Assassin's Creed games, but if they just made big RPG open world games about certain timelines like Egypt, Greek, and now Vikings. Even they could do like feudal Japan, something like Ghost of Tsushima, where they just take a game, take a character, and take a story and build it around that timeline to show a really accurate portrayal of the times and tell an amazing history-based story. It's just because like even too in Assassin's Creed 3, I felt like they just told the story of the American Revolution and just sidelines the whole alternate history, Assassins vs. Templars thing in, like I said, just objects and maybe little tidbits of conversation. It's just, they don't feel like Assassin's Creed games to me anymore, and if they're going to continue down this line, I just feel like it would be best not to call them Assassin's Creed games, just do very accurate, historical, amazing open world adventures about the people and their timeline. One thing I do have to say though is this game does give you a lot of choices in order of shaping the politics, even calling out potential traitors in the game. There's a lot of choices that this game gives you that did really make me have to think, and the consequences can be dire depending on if you choose right or wrong, depending on the context, little things like that. And I did, like I said, really have to think and go back, use my intuition about how is this going to affect the story, if I'm right, if I'm wrong, if I choose this person over this person, am I going to start war, little things like that, which all play into, like I said, actually pretty big ways you can affect the story and the Vikings' influence in the game. And I thought that was just extremely well done, and they did an amazing job with the choices and the dialogue in this game. Easily the best that they've done since they started this RPG style with Origins. If they keep it up like this, it's going to be fantastic, because I loved just how dire some of the consequences and the choices were. But touching a little bit about that, I am annoyed the relationships that you have in this game. Games like Mass Effect or The Witcher have really set a standard for me where you have to work towards a relationship with someone in the game, where you're doing a bunch of quests with them, you're doing things for them, you have to choose the right dialogue options, you can't be a dick to them, little things like this, or maybe you can and that's going to work. Just every character being different. Whereas in this game, a lot of the side quests are like this, but in terms of relationships that you have with people, it's just, there's some quests where you find a brooch in the water and you get to sleep with someone, and then you can do it over and over and over again. And it just feels extremely cheap, demeaning to some of these characters, and even just customs. It's just, if you're going to do the relationships, they have to build it more than just, oh, you do this one thing for me, I'm in love with you forever, little things like that. I just find it's extremely lazy and extremely demeaning. A lot of the side quests, like I said, just really feel this way, where they were so boring or just really lazily written, where there's some where they just didn't really go into Valhalla or Sacrifice, where there's one quest where you just basically throw this guy's belongings off the side of a cliff and he jumps off with just nothing, just because he can do it, pretty much. And they don't really go into explaining why he was doing this way. Or there's two lovers where you they can't get it on, in a sense, if they don't feel like they're in a raid. So while they're in a house, you have to burn it down so they can make love to one another. And there's a lot of quests that are just like that. Most of the quests in this game will take you 5 minutes to do, and I just found they were so uninspired and written so lazily. And a lot of that does creep into the campaigns, where, like, when you're pledging to territories in this game, some of those missions are absolutely amazing, but the bulk of it, I want to say almost 70% of it, is just really lazily written side quests or just character motivations like this. There's some amazing written characters, but it's just the bulk of it is just very, either just way too tedious, it doesn't make sense, or just there's no depth, emotion, just any care for any of these character side quests. And it's just really took me out of the game, and that's where I felt the grind. Not in terms of the progression system, just in exploring the world. It's just got really uninteresting for me. It is very intimidating when you first look at it because of how big it is, but the skill tree in this game is definitely a lot better than its predecessors within the last couple of years of Assassin's Creed games. It is a massive tree just full of abilities that will help increase your armor, your combat, give you certain little extra poison damage, extra archer damage, more power to your light and heavy attacks, more evasive maneuvering. Even too, you will take less damage from ranged weapons or light attacks. And you get this just by progressing through the story, doing side quests, exploring the worlds, just little things like this. And then, of course, there are abilities that you learn through finding sacred texts, and also just armor that you do by just exploring the worlds. But you get your abilities by exploring the world, finding texts, and you can apply them in a very RPG fashion, just kind of like Origins or Odyssey, where you have 4 for melee combats and 4 for your ranged combats, and you just kind of pick and style the way you want to play yourself, which ones are going to, if you like fire damage, you can do that. If you like big heavy power attacks, there's stuff like this, there's poison damage. It just all depends how you like to play the game. And of course too, there is the big order tree that you get, and you get medallions by killing off these members. And then there's a character in the game named Hytham. He's part of the Assassin's Creed order. If you bring the medallions to him, he will give you certain abilities, but most of these are just poison damage in terms of your ranged or your melee combats. There isn't a whole lot for him if you want to find like the extremely cool and heavy powerful attacks that you can do in this game that just seem like straight out of a Mortal Kombat game. You gotta explore and find the texts. And speaking about that, the combat in this game looks absolutely brutal. It's just everything you expect from a Viking game, where you're chopping people's legs off, heads are going flying, people burn and just scream like it's nothing, especially during the raids, which was pretty awesome to do. You can burn houses down, and by burning houses down, you just shoot one arrow and it's on fire for a few seconds and then it goes back. But you're breaking open doors, you're looting chests. The one thing that did kind of get to me a little bit was there is absolutely no naval combat. Your boats are just transport to go from point A to point B. You can play some awesome songs when you're doing so, open the sails, or even tell stories this time around. but there is no naval combat. It's one of my favorite things in the Assassin's Creed game, and it just kind of shocked me that there was absolutely none of that. There's not even a single mission where you do any naval combats. It's just a transport vehicle. But they're a way to help you activate the raids. I mean, even if it was a thing, I probably wouldn't, but you can't kill any civilians around this time. You would get desynchronized as always in Assassin's Creed games, and that just kind of did feel sometimes like it took away from everything that a raid is. If people get in your way, blocking doors, that's what the Vikings would do, but you can't do that this time around. You can't kill civilians. You just have to focus on the big temple guards. Sometimes too, I almost got desynchronized a couple times because guards are running after you, and at the same time civilians are, so you would swing, fortunately kill a civilian, and I almost got desynchronized a couple times because they were just getting in my way. And I just wish that at least during the raids they were kind of fair game. If you hit one of them, it's okay, little things like that. It was just, it started to get to me that I could be desynchronized when everything was so messy, which raids are. This game is extremely buggy. There was a few times where I was just so frustrated. It doesn't matter if it was in the raids, the single player campaign, or just doing some of the side quests. None of it was game breaking for me. Of course, there were a few crashes that I had where it just wasn't able to render the raids properly, but some of the ones that I could think of would be some side quests I would do. Characters, NPCs would have to interact with one another, and the conversation just wouldn't continue on. They would just stare at each other and look at each other, and nothing would happen, and there's nothing I could do about it. Even when I came back after doing a few other quests, it wouldn't fix itself, so I just couldn't complete the quest because like there was nothing for me to interact with. It's just the NPC's dialogue was bugged out and it wasn't working, so I couldn't progress through that. Even too, there are some puzzles you had to solve where the objects I needed to basically activate or maneuver around disappeared on me, so I couldn't do those quests, couldn't find these little loots. And then with some of the raids, there's doors that you have to open with another NPC, like 2 people need to do it. And even too, when you raid, when you open up chests, too heavy for yourself to do, so you need one of your NPCs to do it with you. I would start the raid and my NPCs, my Vikings, would not get off the boat. They would just stay on the boat. There was nothing I could do for them to get off of the boat and raid with me. So I could kill every single temple guard, like completely clear everything else, but I couldn't complete the raids because I couldn't either open the doors or open the chest myself. And it was just, like I said, a time waster for a lot of it. Of course, every now and then there was the flying horse that would spawn in, little things like that, but there was just, this happened way too often for me to enjoy a lot of it, especially too when a lot of the quests in this game are, there's a huge variety to what you can do in terms of the side quests, but a lot of them are so unclear about what you're supposed to be doing. A lot of them are buggy, and even though there's a lot of variety, it's just you're doing the exact same thing in a brand new location, and there's not really anything to switch it up, especially in terms of the glitches and the hallucination side missions. I just had a lot of glitches with the glitch missions, and then with the hallucinations, I had no idea what I was doing, and it didn't explain how to figure out which gate you need to go to. It was just basically guess for half an hour, and eventually you'd get there. And that just really annoyed me because I found it was just so lazily written and so lazily put together. One thing that I should mention too that kind of ties a little bit to the combat is it does at first, it is very slow and a little tough to get into because you just have like your one attack, and it's just, the combat seems really simple. But once you start upgrading, getting new weapons, and even too, there's a huge variety of weapons, and you can attach runes and just even like little things that just tweak it a little more to your liking. And I want to say about after 10-15 hours in the game, that's when I started to feel at home with the combat. So that's when I found it was really unique and interesting with every single weapon. It takes a while to upgrade Eivor to that point, but once you start to play around with it, get into the game a little more, the combat opens up quite a bit, and especially when you are fighting boss-like enemies. A lot of them are very challenging fights, and you got to be a high level. If you're not, you're going to get absolutely smoked by these people. But even to just trying to take them on when you're lower level is a lot of fun when you kind of get at home with the weapon that you like. The last thing I will say about this is it does take you to Asgard. It does take you to a bunch of different realms in the Norse mythology. I thought it was amazing at first. I was so excited for it. You don't get any godly powers even though you're playing as Odin. You see that in Thor and all these other characters, but you don't get that yourself and you're playing as Ivar. And it's just the same grind in the combat over and over and over again, where every single fight, like I said, different location, but you're doing the same thing. And it just got very tedious and very grindy in terms of me just trying to get through everything in the game. And I wish that even the story itself in these missions were just so boring. I don't get how they can do such an amazing job with the story of the Norsemen and their lore, but not really bring that in, or just the fascination of Asgard and gods. They just didn't nail upon that in these missions for me, and I found it was the most boring part of the game, where I thought it was sick when I was first playing it, but then I just got sick of it near the end of it, and it was just really disappointing for me not to be able to get into all of that. But with all this taken together, with the things that I loved about it, the things that I didn't like about it, this was a very tough one for me, where I wasn't certain. I was bouncing around these two numbers where I was thinking, am I going to give this a light 6? But at the end of the day, just because of all the bugs, how lazily programmed this game was, just how it isn't Assassin's Creed for me anymore. I just really miss the order. I miss just some of the amazing characters. I do have to say, Ivar is easily my favorite character since Ezio that you've been able to play as. He was very well written, but just a lot of the other characters did not do it for me in this game. I have to give Assassin's Creed Valhalla a 5 out of 10. It's just really lost the magic for me, Assassin's Creed, and I feel like Ubisoft needs to ditch the title if they're not going to go into the alternate history and just the Assassins and Templar Order that made the series what it was when it first launched out. It doesn't feel like Assassin's Creed to me anymore, and I am really missing that. But if you played Assassin's Creed Valhalla, please let me know in the comments what you thought about it. What was your most favorite thing about it? What was your least favorite thing about it? And of course, you can watch my full playthrough for the game through my playlist down below, and you can check out everything else I do on this channel through my playlist down below. If you like this video, of course, give it a thumbs up. You can subscribe and turn the little ringer on if you want to know when I upload new videos. But awesome, guys. I can't wait till Cyberpunk and all these other games come out, so you'll be able to watch it, of course, on my YouTube and on my Twitch channel, which is in my link down below. But yeah, awesome.